Hi everyone, my name is Olivia. I'm a senior at Earlham College and I'm also a peer career coach. So today we'll have Luke with us. Thank you so much, Luke, again for taking some of your very precious time to be here with us. So I'll give you like a general format of how things are going to go. So basically we'll have 20 minutes for an interview. And after these 20 minutes, we'll open it up for another 20 minutes if anybody else has questions. So we spent around 40 minutes together today. So I'll go ahead and ask my first questions. So Luke, can you please introduce yourself and tell us a bit more about your background?
Sure. I'm Luke Klippinger. I'm a member of the Maryland House of Delegates. I represent the 46th District in South and Southeast Baltimore City. In the House of Delegates, I'm the chair of the House Judiciary Committee. We deal with issues related to criminal law, civil law, family law, and juvenile law. The legislature is a 90-day a week, or 90-day a week, feels like it sometimes, 90 days a year session. We normally meet from January, about the second week of January to the second week of April. This year we adjourned early. We adjourned in the middle of March because of what was going on with the coronavirus. So we normally would have adjourned a week or two ago. That's considered a part-time job. But my regular day job is as a prosecutor, as an assistant state's attorney in Anne Arundel County, Maryland, which is the county to the south of Baltimore. That also is the location of our state capital, Annapolis. I grew up in Baltimore. My family were homesteaders. We bought our house for $1 in 1974. So I grew up in Reservoir Hill in the middle part of Baltimore City. And lived there and went to Baltimore City Public Schools until I went to Earlham in 1990 and had a wonderful experience at Earlham, graduating in 1994 with a degree in politics. When I was at Earlham, I ran WECI for almost 3 years. Before going out and working in politics and then working in the law. I got my law degree from the University of Louisville, Louis D. Brandeis School of Law. I was living across the river from Louisville at the time, working for a member of Congress. So I went to school, law school at night, before returning back to Baltimore.
Yeah. Louisville in Kentucky?
Yes, Louisville, Kentucky. Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow. Nice. So I was wondering, what are your responsibilities as a prosecutor on a daily basis?
Sure. It's right now I have a docket of about 30 or it's getting closer to 40 cases. I am handling cases as a prosecutor related to gun crime, to serious assaults. I have a range of different cases beyond that, but they mostly fall into the illegal possession of firearms and what we call first-degree assaults, which is assault with something more than your fists. I'm also helping with an attempted murder trial right now. So a lot of that is answering motions, staying on top of cases, staying on top of everything that's going on with all of those cases. And it's certainly more challenging now when we don't have juries. We don't have jury trials because we can't put together a jury in the courthouse. So there's a lot of staying in contact with victims of crimes and seeking justice for them.
Yeah, you talked about having like currently 40 cases. How long does it usually take you to like, solve one case on average?
So under our law, you have to at least try the case 180 days from the time, more or less, that the case was charged. That's not entirely precise, but give or take, about 6 months. Usually each case takes around 3 or 4 months to go from start to some kind of conclusion, whether it's a trial or a plea or something along those lines. It can be longer, and sometimes if it goes beyond, it can go beyond, I should say, 180 days,
Okay.
and that actually is probably what we're going to be looking at quite a bit this summer,
Yeah.
because nobody's able to do anything right now.
Mm.
So yeah, it can be challenging to balance all of that.
Yeah. And also you mentioned like majoring in politics at Earlham and also going to law school at Louisville. And I was wondering, like, how did you get into the field that you are currently? And, going from politics to law, but then, like, how did you start thinking about politics, for example, for instance?
Well, I've always had an interest in politics and in policy. And again, growing up as a kid in a house we bought for $1, that was policy. That was a policy from the city of Baltimore to try and renovate houses in Baltimore City, by taking houses that the city owned,
Mm-hmm.
uh, or quickly took possession of, that were falling apart, with an eye towards rebuilding those houses and rebuilding those neighborhoods. And it was eye-opening even as a child. Um, there were some parts of the city of Baltimore where they did whole blocks, and I actually represent one of the neighborhoods where whole neighborhoods were done by through the homesteading program in Otterbein,
Mm-hmm.
and that was very successful. But in the neighborhood I grew up in, and it's a difficult to measure success, but the level of home ownership didn't recover in the neighborhood that I grew up in, at least when I was there. It's starting to make some fits and starts now. So this is the long way around of saying, I grew up in what was a public policy experiment. So working in that area and getting involved with politics was something that was kind of second nature to me. When I was at Earlham, I was very involved in the Wayne County Democratic Party. And then after graduating Earlham, I was able to get an internship at the Indiana General Assembly, where I worked for Senator Lendell Hume and Joe O'Dea from southwestern Indiana. Then I met people there and was able to run the campaign for Lee Hamilton in 1996, in his last term as a member of Congress, before running Barron Hill's campaign in 98 and staying with him for 6 years as his district director. And then coming back to Baltimore, finishing my law degree and going from there.
Well, nice. I really feel like your upbringing in like Baltimore truly influenced your pathway, when it comes to like politics and also going to law school. But then how is it influencing as well your role as a prosecutor right now, growing up in like Baltimore?
Um, I, I, I'm not so sure that I totally saw crack cocaine hit the neighborhood I grew up in. I'm pretty sure I saw it. I'm pretty sure I saw heroin, at least. I mean, I've been a prosecutor now for almost 13 years. Putting together what I saw as a child with what I've seen now, when Bethlehem Steel went away, and the jobs in Beth Steel went away, a large number of people, including a large number of African-American people who lived in my neighborhood, they lost their jobs, and it kicked out the underpinnings of the neighborhood. And so you see what happens when those economic underpinnings fail. And then you see the arrival of drug abuse. You see the arrival of any number of other challenges. My mom saw the result of a violent crime in our neighborhood, and it was a common occurrence that we heard or saw very, very violent crimes that happened not far from us. Having said that, you get a whole picture of what, or I feel like I got a very whole picture. I cannot claim, I'm not going to claim as a white guy that I can know what it was like for the people I played with on that block, what it was like for them to grow up, the discrimination that they found, the discrimination that they experienced. But as I've grown older, and as I reflect back on what I saw and what I experienced, you get you keep that in your mind, and especially as a prosecutor now,
Yes.
there's a huge challenge that we face in addressing issues, especially related to drug abuse, to and to mental health, that we aren't dealing with very well. So as a legislator, I can deal with those a little bit better. As a prosecutor, it can be challenging, but we have done a lot in Maryland through justice reinvestment to build up programs like our drug court program. And I'll be real quick with this, but the drug court program puts people into intensive supervision and gives them sort of a backstop. So because when people are dealing with drug addiction, they fall backwards, and you have to catch them and give them a chance again to get on their feet.
Mm-hmm.
So all of that kind of comes together, and yes, in Baltimore we have a lot of challenges, but we work very hard to try and improve the lives of a lot of people here in Baltimore.
Okay. Thank you so much for that. And I was wondering, what do you enjoy the most working in your positions? I already had a glimpse of it, since you talked about all these things, but what do you enjoy the most?
Well, in each job, do you mean, or in each job?
Yeah.
I mean, in the state's attorney job, you're working to help, in some cases, in many cases, the victim of crime, and that's meaningful. There's also the opportunity to help the defendant, and my friends in the public defender's office are all laughing at home right now when they hear a prosecutor say that, and that's fine. I get that, but I think that sometimes, a lot of times, we want to see justice. We want to see justice for the victim, but as I've said many times before in a political context, I don't want to see you again if I see you in the courtroom. I don't want to see you again. I really don't. But I need you to engage in the services that are available, but I also need you to be able to access those services. And so that goes over to my job as a legislator, and some of the things that I've worked on in the legislature. As chair of the Judiciary Committee, we've done a lot of work both during my time and in previous terms to help people deal with issues related to drug abuse, but not just that, to move money out of incarcerating people for lower level offenses and putting it into real treatment. And one of the genuine challenges that we're going to face, I think, going forward, is what to do, not just on drug treatment, but also in mental health treatment. That is going to be one of our bigger challenges going forward. And it's a money issue, it's a people issue, it's all kinds of different issues. But as a legislator, you really do get to have an impact on making those substantive changes. And one other thing that I was fortunate enough to do in my last 4-year term is I passed I was the sponsor of the Earned Sick Leave bill in Maryland that gave Marylanders who didn't already get sick leave, 700,000 Marylanders 5 days of sick leave, something that the opponent said would result in the end of the world and everything else. Well, kind of glad we have it now, but I wish it could have been more than 5 days. But having said that, that's where we are, and we at least got that passed here in Maryland.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's truly amazing, and I wish more people could take that route. And I'm just wondering as well, what is the biggest challenge that you face in both roles?
I mean, the challenge in the legislative role is you have a limited amount of time, and a whole lot of need. And growing up here in Baltimore, you see the need up close and personal. Um, and people expect you to be able to do something for literally every concern that they have. And that's not to minimize some very significant concerns, but sometimes you can't help everybody. In fact, all the time, you can't help everybody. So you have to prioritize things, and you have to work with your other members of the legislature to build coalitions. That's the thing that I think people sometimes expect, especially legislators, to simply do everything, and they can just wave a magic wand and it magically happens. It isn't that simple. And so that is something that that can be a challenging, is you have the ability to do a lot, but sometimes there's a bandwidth issue, as I sometimes put it. As a prosecutor, I mean, it comes from both directions. Sometimes in domestic violence cases, you can see the cycle of abuse happening between people. You can see them coming back again and again, but you have people who don't want to go forward. He promised me he wouldn't do it again.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's very hard to break that cycle sometimes, that cycle of abuse, and that can be very, very, very frustrating. And then the flip side of that is people think that if you get convicted for, in Maryland, if you get convicted for breaking into somebody's house, it carries a maximum sentence of 20 years. People think that you're going to get 20 years, and that's not what happens. But helping people to understand that you have to have, in some cases, suspended sentences to have leverage to make sure that they are breaking that cycle themselves is somewhat challenging to explain.
I see. So basically what you mean is that the sentence is not always what happens, but then you can give people a second chance to not like go through all the 20 years.
Well, if you are convicted, and you will not be convicted of second-degree burglary, or first-degree burglary. If you're convicted of a burglary, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get the maximum sentence. I think sometimes people expect that you're definitely going to get the maximum sentence, and that's not how our criminal justice system works. And so I think sometimes people put an outsized expectation that when they are convicted, it's going to solve the problem. The problem very, very rarely gets solved. The problem, the issue is an issue that a person had, and that person could be recovering from drug abuse. It could be experiencing drug addiction, could be having mental health issues, could be homeless, could have experienced any number of different things in the case of serious property crimes. In the cases of violent crimes, that's maybe a little bit of a different story. That when you commit a homicide, when you commit a rape, when you commit things like that, that is more understandable. But the vast majority of crimes that are out there are not in those violent categories usually.
Thank you. We have a couple more minutes, and I was wondering, how did the liberal arts education at Earlham help you actually find a career fit for you?
Well, I've always said Earlham gave me the chance to try things and fail. And I think as a liberal arts education is very, very important, because you get to try things in a lot of different fields and maybe not fail all the time. And I did just find it Earl, but maybe not fail, but you get exposed to a lot of different things and a lot of different ideas. And it makes you a better and more well-rounded person. While at the same time, if you decide that is one thing is what you want to do, you can really focus in and dig deep in areas, and you can learn quite a bit that way. So I think Earlham always will hold a great place in my heart, because it's where I was able to succeed and where I was able to fail.
Oh.
It's in a safe place.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing all this. It was very informative and like very nice to hear all these beautiful things that you are doing, changing the world and in your own way. So it's now 4:22 and I will open it to like anyone who has questions for you right now. Feel free to ask.
Luke, I was wondering what your experience was like in law school and what tips do you have for students who might be interested in going to law school after Earlham?
So I started law school in 2001, and I at that point was a district director for Congressman Barron Hill in Southern Indiana. That was challenging enough to have a full-time job and then go to law school. I guess the first bit of advice that I would give to anyone thinking about law school is if you want to go to law school, you really should think about it carefully. And I'd encourage you to some people get a law degree just because their letters after the name and they don't ever go into a courtroom. I think that the most important part of a law degree is, in fact, that experience of going into a courtroom. Now, look, I'm a litigator for almost 13 years, so I like going into courtrooms. Some people absolutely don't. But that part of the law school experience is really important and sometimes lost in the rush to get a good grade or something like that. I found my experience honestly in the night program to be really, really interesting. I found my experience in the night program to be usually they were people who were a little older, who had experience outside of just being in school. And that was a very, very positive experience to hear how the law was impacting all of their jobs as well. And so part of it is if you're going to go to law school, have a pretty good idea of what direction you want to go in. Doesn't foreclose that you can go in another direction, but in fact be open to that. But for the life of me, if you had told me in 2001 when I started that I was going to be a prosecutor, I would have said you were crazy. But here I am. The judge, she's now a judge. The person who hired me was a deputy state's attorney and said, just see if you'd like it. Just see if you'd like this job. We think you'd be good at it for 6 months. Give it 6 months. And I'm still there 12 and a half years later. So so to answer again your question, you need to go into it with your eyes open. Don't be afraid to go at night. And you might get more out of it after you have had experience in the rest of the world coming back and going to law school as opposed to going directly from Earlham directly into law school.
Okay. I was also wondering, is there like a typical path to becoming like a legislator or a prosecutor? And if there is, what is this typical path?
Well, let's start with the prosecutor. I mean, usually, at least here in Maryland, there are a couple well-worn paths. Usually, if you become a clerk to a circuit court judge, a county judge in Maryland, you've got one pathway because you're building connections with the people who are already working in that system. The theme I'll hit on here is it is about building connections. It is about talking to a lot of people. I had the door open to becoming a prosecutor because I helped a campaign for a guy for the office where I work now, Frank Weathersby, who has since passed away. I helped his campaign in 2006 and got to know the people who worked in the office, including the person who's now a judge, who turned me on to being a state's attorney. I think sometimes people get hung up on the pathway, and it's not just, it's putting yourself near the path, but it's also building connections and meeting people and building out networks and talking to people who you might not think about as being, maybe a person who doesn't have a natural connection, because they may connect you to the person who can set you up with your dream job. As a legislator, it takes a lot of work to run for the House of Delegates. My first time I ran, I knocked on 20,000 doors in Baltimore City. Now, part of that's cheating because I'm in my row house right now, and all of our houses are about 10 feet wide. So that sort of not in a rural and not in a suburban area, but still you have to get out there, you have to raise the money, you have to meet people, and you have to believe in yourself, and you have to have friends who believe in you too, and that takes a long time to put together as well.
So if you're joining us right now, or we are now asking questions, we opened up the session for anyone who has questions for you. My next question is, are there too many people or few people entering the fields that you are in?
Lately, perhaps in the last maybe year or two, there has been a drop in the number of, well, it's hard for me to tell because I don't hire assistant attorneys. There are always people who want to run for office, but for assistant state's attorneys, there has been a little bit more of a challenge. And one of the areas that people are focused on is in criminal justice reform, and the argument is that, you know, if you're a prosecutor, you're just putting everybody in jail. How can you be part of a solution for that? We have a wide range of people who are prosecutors and who come from a lot of different political beliefs and a lot of different philosophies. So there's room for everybody there, but we've seen a little bit of a drop off. And I guess it comes back to don't presume ever that job is something I would never, ever want to do, because you may not have been exposed enough to that. And like I said, with being a legislator, there are lots of people who want to do that. But if you want to do that, go right ahead. Don't run against me.
I won't. I think that would be hard to do. And
I see the chat. What piece of advice did you get that you think every Earlham student can use, or did think an Earlham student can use? Listen. Shut up every once in a while. But listen and it's a skill that I think Earlhamites are really, really, really good at. Just listen to people.
Yeah.
And listen to what they're saying and listen to what they're not saying. It's a skill that has been very helpful to me as an attorney, and very, very helpful to me in politics in the legislature.
This question is quite interesting and can be also challenging, but what is the best career decision you have ever made so far?
The best career decision I've made so far? Certainly as a prosecutor here in Baltimore, has been a great decision. I'll start with one of the first ones. It was only, basically 3 months, but taking the opportunity to work in the Indiana General Assembly and get a glimpse of what both politics and policymaking is really like. We weren't writing bills. We were responding to letters, but you got to get a sense of the nuance of things. Yeah. And having that opportunity to really get into that was great. I will say the job that was certainly the most, one of the early job that I mentioned before that I really did enjoy. I learned to drive at Earlham. But my first real job was as a campaign manager for Lee Hamilton, where I got to drive all over Southern Indiana in a car that they gave me. And it was great. And I got to meet a lot of different people, and I got to be exposed to a lot of different people. And I, consider myself a pretty liberal person, but when you go to Southern Indiana, you discover that you are the extreme far left, more maybe leftish. And with no disrespect to anyone in Southern Indiana, many friends there in Southern Indiana who would take offense to that. But having said that, it was incredibly eye-opening. Every day was very, very interesting, and you got to learn a lot. And that taking advantage of those early jobs, those early jobs. Don't pretend that you know everything. You really don't. You really, really don't. But listen to the people who do, and even the people who you don't think know what they're talking about. It's important to listen to everyone, listen to them well.
Okay, thank you. We have about 7 minutes together, and there was also like a question that I had, and also I think it's also useful for Earlham students, because when I was reading your bio, I was truly impressed with all the things you have done, and I was wondering, how do you balance these two positions that you have?
Well, my partner Patrick would I don't know, he'd take exception to whether I balance them very well, but we'll see. It's been 10 years in the legislature now, and 12 and a half as a state's attorney. For a practical purpose, during the legislative session, I go part-time as a prosecutor, so I'm able to balance it that way. But it's challenging. You go to work. I get in the car, drive to Annapolis, go to work as a prosecutor. Done at about 4:30 or 5. Get in the car, go to community meetings, usually, or meetings with constituents, and you balance it because it's what you love doing, and it's what I love doing. I love both of these jobs. And they've been very meaningful and helpful for me professionally. So it is very, very, very hard. And I will say, there are a lot of states across the country that have part-time legislatures, and increasingly part-time legislatures are not all that part-time. We are very much full-time operations in a lot of cases. I'm not saying that we should become full-time. I'm just saying that we do a lot, and especially now during everything that's going on, I have a staffer who has a new bit of casework pretty much every day, more than one usually, from people all across the district, and it's challenging to sometimes balance that additional work when you're not in session and don't have ready access all the time. You have to balance all of that out with your own life as well.
Does it come like easily, or did you have to kind of like grow with it and trying to like, make both positions work at the same time?
Well, certainly. I think that this is my third term. We have 4-year terms, so I'm in the second year of my third term. You do have to balance them out. You take a lot of advice from a lot of people, but I'm very fortunate to work as a state's attorney, and very fortunate to work for somebody who has been willing to allow me to have this part-time job on the side, and that you have to have that if you're going to be able to do this. And that's not something that's very easy for people to do. The part-time job, it pays fine for a part-time job, but for some people, I'm not complaining about my money. For some people, they find it very difficult. There's a member of the legislature who was fantastic from Annapolis, who literally resigned the day after the end of session because she could not remain as a legislator and keep her job. And that's very, very hard. And it limits the number of people who can come into the legislature and contribute. And so we lose that diversity a little bit with that. But it's a huge challenge to balance all of that.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think We have around 3 minutes, and like I have a last question for you. I'm wondering, like, especially during these times, it's a bit harder, but like for Earlham students who are now getting ready for the job market, what kind of advice do you have for them? You touch on building connections, and do you have any other advice you think can be useful for these students going out in the job market currently?
So, it's something that we sometimes forget is you do want to keep in touch, and I think Earlham students are pretty good with keeping in touch with other Earlhamites. Although I will say I'm hopeful that we can build what I would call the Earlham caucus. We have an informal Earlham caucus of legislators from across the country, and Senator Gelser from Oregon, um, uh, Representative Hohenstein from, I think that's right, from Philadelphia, and I think Greg Porter from Indianapolis are all in legislatures. There are other Earlhamites who are in elected offices around the country as well. But keeping those networks and keeping up with those networks is important, because you never know who's going to know somebody else, and that never ever presume that people won't know that additional person. So that's the advice I'd give as you go out into the market. Is it's not that you have to go up to everybody and say, hey, I'm looking for a job, will you pay me? It's maintaining those connections, keeping an eye out for those ground floor opportunities, and trying some of them. And it's hard, but if it works out, great. If it doesn't work out, try another one, but keep trying.
That's very true. I know from personal experience. But yeah, thank you so much, Luke, for
You're
being
very welcome.
here. It was such a pleasure, and we learned so much talking to you. We truly appreciate your time and consideration.
Sure.
Thank you. Have
All
a
right.
great day. And please feel free to stay on the chat because we'll have hands soon. Otherwise,
That's fine. I'll hang around for a few more minutes if you have another one starting at 4:45.
yeah, at 4:45.
That's fine. I'll hang around for a few more minutes. Sure.